At 8 in the evening, heavy rain was pouring down. I stood at the village entrance, clutching my pregnant belly and enduring the contractions. Finally, I saw Dad's old, battered car approaching from a distance. As soon as it stopped, I tearfully opened the passenger door and struggled to climb in, eager to pour out all my grievances to him. The next second, I found myself staring face to face with a large golden retriever. "You sit in the back," said Yu Chunlan. Only when she spoke did I realize it was her, and I immediately choked back my tears. I had no intention of complaining anymore. I wanted to argue with her, but I didn't have the extra energy. Once I was seated in the back, Yu Chunlan muttered softly, "Handbrake, accelerator, turn signal. Hey Do, sit tight, we're about to take off." The wipers responded by sweeping even more frantically. The golden retriever, Hey Do, watched me with concern. I was utterly speechless. "Where's my dad?" I asked weakly after a wave of pain passed. Yu Chunlan paused. He had something he couldn't leave. What could be more important than me? I took a deep breath, bracing for the next wave of contractions. I was in so much pain, yet my parents-in-law insisted on taking me to the hospital tomorrow morning, saying it was too dark and rainy to call a car. My mother-in-law tried to comfort me, saying that women always endure a long time of pain before giving birth, unlike hens that lay eggs quickly. If worse came to worst, the midwife next door, Granny Wei, could help deliver the baby. Forget that. I had to leave if I wanted to live. But the village was remote. My husband Zhou Lei's phone was unreachable, so I had to ask Dad for help. I never expected Dad to ignore me and send my stepmother Yu Chunlan, along with her dog, to pick me up. Not long after the car started, Yu Chunlan suddenly pulled over to the side of the road and turned around with a smile. "Haha, now you're finally in your stepmother's hands." I was drowsy between the waves of pain, but her words startled me awake. I watched as she got out in the rain, opened the trunk, and handed me something. "Why is it so cold when it rains?" "Luckily, I have a blanket. Cover yourself with it. We'll be at the hospital soon." I instinctively took the blanket and wrapped myself in it. Yu Chunlan scared me. I really disliked her. As another more intense wave of pain hit, I thought to myself and then whispered, "I'm in so much pain. I want to eat a grilled chicken leg burger." Maybe it was the strength from eating the burger, but by 11 that night, I had delivered my son naturally. After a brief nap, I woke up to find Yu Chunlan by my bedside. She told me that earlier that day, Dad had an accident at work and lost his right pinky and ring finger. Hearing this, I struggled to sit up with all my might. "Lie down." Yu Chunlan pressed me back. "Your dad has already been here, don't worry." I became more anxious, sitting up abruptly. "I want to see my dad." How could I not worry? I didn't even know how badly he was hurt. Despite that, he still came to see me. Yu Chunlan hurriedly pushed me back onto the bed again. "Don't move. You just gave birth, not dealing with diarrhea. Relax, your dad said he would see you tomorrow morning." Sure enough, early the next morning, Dad came to the hospital room. "It must hurt a lot, doesn't it?" I asked through tears. "Dad, why didn't you tell me about something this serious?" Dad gazed at the baby without blinking, grinning broadly. "You were about to give birth. Why add to your worries at such a critical time? Besides, your aunt is taking care of me, isn't she?" "Aunt? Where is she? Did she leave you alone in the hospital to go back and take care of her dog?" "Dandan, don't speak about your aunt like that. She stayed up all night with you." "Why shouldn't I say that? To her, the dog is more important than anyone. She took a pregnant woman to the hospital and insisted on having a dog in the passenger seat." I felt a bit guilty, but I remained defiant. There was no other choice. Given the situation last night, only your aunt could pick you up. Although she just got her driver's license not long ago, she drove really well. It was her first time driving on rural roads, so it's understandable she brought Heido for comfort. I gasped, recalling Yu Chunlan's driving last night. It seemed miraculous that we were safe, thanks to some divine favor. Didn't Dad realize that since marrying Yu Chunlan, he had become a bit unreliable? But now is not the time to argue about that. I gently touched Dad's hand, wrapped in bandages, feeling a sharp pain in my heart. Dad wiped my tears. "You shouldn't cry during your postpartum period. It'll make me hurt too. Ow." His attempt to scare me didn't work, and I burst into tears. "I'm sorry, Dad. I shouldn't have been so willful, ignoring you for so many days." Mom passed away early, and I grew up relying solely on Dad. It wasn't until the second year of my marriage that Dad mentioned remarrying. Yu Chunlan, 50 years old, ran a tiny clothing store, and all her income went to supporting a stray dog shelter in the suburbs. Her shoe soles were nearly worn out, but she wouldn't buy new ones, instead carrying bags of dog food up the mountain. Without a doubt, with her uncontrollable adoption of stray dogs, Dad would end up being dragged down. But I couldn't persuade my dad. He was as stubborn as a rock and held a simple wedding even though I refused to attend. This deepened my prejudice against Yu Chunlan. I felt she was good at bewitching people, and Dad had already fallen under her spell. So, I took my anger out on Dad and moved to the city with Zhou for work. I had never been separated from Dad for so long. He missed me and would drive for hours to see me, his trunk filled with all kinds of food and drinks, feeding me generously. Gradually, my anger subsided. Without Yu Chunlan around, it seemed like the good old days between Dad and me had returned. Dad said, "Dandan, why don't you come home? Look at you, with such a big belly, still bending over to wash clothes in a basin." Zhou, a technician, had a dormitory provided by his boss, but it lacked basic amenities. No kitchen, no private bathroom, no washing machine. I genuinely missed home. I missed the sunlight on my bedroom windowsill and my bed, which I had slept in since I was little. So, considering the due date, I packed my bags and went back home to await the birth. We hadn't had a chance to buy a house in the county yet. Zhou wanted me to stay with his parents, but I insisted on being with Dad. Living in the county would make prenatal checkups and hospital visits easier. My reasoning was sound, and although Zhou was not pleased, he didn't stop me. Our home was in an old community on Hui Tree Lane, with a small courtyard on the first floor. The house was old and shabby, but it held all my memories. Eager to return, I opened the door, and every hair on my body stood on end. Sitting squarely in front of the door was a large dog, baring its teeth at me. I had been afraid of dogs since I was a child, so I nearly jumped out of my skin. Yu Chunlan hurried over to support me. "Hey Do, this is Dandan Jia. Dandan, yeah." The dog retracted its fangs, curiously inspecting me for a moment before suddenly sticking out its tongue and licking my hand with a rough, wet swipe. I nearly fainted on the spot. At dinner, I gave Yu Chunlan an ultimatum. Either the dog goes, or I go. Dad tried to mediate. "Try some of the seafood porridge your aunt specially made for you." I pushed the bowl away. "Dad, I'm about to have a baby. From a health and safety perspective, there can't be a dog in the house." Yu Chunlan hurried to explain. "Hey Do is regularly dewormed and vaccinated. It never bites." I turned my head to Dad. "Dad? Hey Do can't be sent away." Yu Chunlan's attitude hardened. "This is my home, and I can make this decision." Seeing her agitation, the dog walked over, resting its head on her lap, whimpering softly. I felt a mix of extreme anger and sadness. The house I had lived in for so many years was now the home of a strange woman and her strange dog. Seeing Dad still silent, I said, "Fine, if the dog stays, I go." After all, a married daughter is like spilled water, isn't she? Dad panicked and tried to stop me, but I still hailed a cab and left Hui Tree Lane, heading to my in-laws' place. After that, I refused to contact Dad, deliberately ignoring his calls. He hadn't sided with me at a crucial moment. It wasn't until that rainy night, desperate and with nowhere to go, that I realized Dad was still my greatest support, so I shamelessly reached out to him. The day after our baby was born, Zhou arrived home around noon. He first checked on our son and then began complaining about how exhausted he was. He criticized me. "You should have let my parents take care of things. At least I wouldn't have had to rush like this." I was furious. "After the way your parents treated me, how can you even suggest that? Rural people have simpler ways of thinking. They didn't mean to harm you." Remember, you're carrying their grandson, Zhou Lei said dismissively. They just want to see their grandson. Try to understand their feelings. I couldn't be understanding because I was still haunted by the experience. But Zhou Lei had his own plans. On the day I was discharged from the hospital, without consulting me, he decided to take me to his parents' house for the postpartum period. I took our son and locked myself in the bathroom. I'm not going. I want to go back to my own home. Young lady, once you're married, your husband's home is your home, advised the mother-in-law of another patient in the same room. Not true. Her words only fueled my anger. The baby woke up and started crying loudly. At that moment, I realized that with this little one, where could I go if I didn't return to Zhou Lei's house? Back to Huitree Lane? Would Yu Chunlan send away her dog? She was right. It was her home now. If she wanted to keep a dog, she could keep a dog. Dad supported her. Rent a place? No time. Stay in a hotel? Too expensive. The world was vast, yet I had nowhere to go but Zhou Lei's parents' home. Pondering this, I felt a profound sadness. Suddenly, I heard Yu Chunlan calling from outside. Dandan, don't do anything rash. She almost broke the door down. To avoid the cost of repairs, I had to come out. Zhou Lei conceded. Fine, if you don't want to go back, we won't. We'll do whatever you want. Then he turned to Yu Chunlan. I only have 10 days off. How about letting Dandan stay at her father's place for the postpartum period? Yu Chunlan's expression changed, and she quickly shook her head. That won't work. Dandan's dad is injured. I can't take care of both a patient and Dandan. She began counting on her fingers, and there's a baby. I have dogs at home, the shelter outside, and my shop to run. I felt deeply hurt and shouted, Enough. I never expected you to help anyway. Just then, my dad walked in and glanced at Yu Chunlan. Then, under everyone's watchful eyes, he reached out to me. Dandan, let's go. Dad will take you home. Opening the courtyard door, I was once again greeted by Haidu blocking the way. This time, however, it wasn't showing any aggression but was instead wagging its tail vigorously. It's smart. It still remembers you, Dad said. I showed no interest, clutching the baby and hurrying inside. Back in familiar surroundings, I fell into a deep sleep. When I woke up, still with my eyes closed, I overheard Yu Chunlan arguing with my dad. Dad said, You go and take care of your own things. I'll take care of Dandan and the baby. Yu Chunlan sighed. In your condition, how can you take care of others? I may have lost 2 fingers, but I'm not paralyzed. Chunlan, I know exactly what you're thinking about not wanting Dandan back home. Don't think I don't. We could have discussed it, couldn't we? Rejecting her outright must have hurt her deeply. I silently chuckled. Yu Chunlan was afraid that if I returned, Haidu would have to go. This gave me an idea. If she thought I was a plague, I might as well show her my presence. I was about to get up and stir the pot when I felt something strange. Slowly turning my head, I was met with a dog's head, startlingly close. Haidu had somehow made its way into the room and was sitting by the bed, quietly observing me and the baby. Its face was so close that I could see the color of its pupils. I gasped, then screamed, leaping from the bed. Dad and Yu Chunlan rushed in. What's wrong? What happened? The dog. My heart raced as I picked up a pillow and threw it at Haidu. Get out! Get out! Frightened, Haidu slipped and scrambled to escape. Dad and Yu Chunlan argued half the night, their voices occasionally mingled with sobs. The next morning, I heard noises outside and opened the door to see Yu Chunlan about to leave with the dog. Haidu had a small bag strapped to its back and was grinning foolishly. Seeing me, it flinched. Yu Chunlan glanced at me. We're going to the shelter. This old fool thinks it's just going out to play. I felt an inexplicable emptiness. Seeing Haidu trotting behind Yu Chunlan with little steps made me feel slightly guilty. But so what? I wasn't living with a dog. I shook my head, dismissing the fleeting feeling of guilt. Yu Chunlan was very downcast about Haidu and didn't speak to my dad for several days or meet my eyes. Yet, to be fair, she took care of me diligently. She worried about my headaches, afraid my eyesight would deteriorate, fussing like any concerned mother. My in-laws visited once, catching Zhou Lei doing laundry. My mother-in-law was outraged, accusing Yu Chunlan. Are you heartless? My son is washing a woman's underwear. That's bad luck for him. I couldn't bear it. She doesn't owe us anything. Taking care of me is out of kindness. What right do you have to scold her? Seeing me defend Yu Chunlan, my father-in-law spat on the ground, and my mother-in-law sneered. Annoyed, I told Zhou Lei to take them out for a meal. Dad, out of courtesy, wanted to keep them, but I yelled, Dad, don't you dare. Yu Chunlan found me overbearing. Your temper is so bad, even the dog gets annoyed. If it weren't for your dad, I wouldn't want to deal with you. Just finish your postpartum period and sort things out yourself. She then criticized me, having a child without a house. You're nothing like my daughter. She always planned everything. Her words gave me a headache, but I held my tongue. Yu Chunlan's daughter, Ingwa, had committed suicide years ago. She could mention it, but no matter how bitter I was, I knew to avoid that topic. So, I stayed silent, and she became lost in thought, creating an awkward atmosphere. I had no choice but to call out, Dad, I want some tofu pudding. Dad quickly came in with a large enamel mug. Got it. Just made fresh. Plenty for you. Sweet or savory? I asked. Trust me, the sweet one is delicious. Yu Chunlan interjected. Sweet is too cloying. Sweet is nourishing. You should try it. I can't eat the savory one. Yu Chunlan was puzzled. You can't eat savory now? Oh, slip of the tongue. I can't eat the sweet one. Seeing us conversing amiably, Dad prepared to leave. I grabbed him. Dad, stay and chat with me. Yu Chunlan glared at us before storming out. A few minutes later, she shouted loudly, My head hurts, my neck hurts. Everything hurts. Are you going to take care of me or not? Zhou Lei resigned from his out-of-town job and joined a friend's factory locally. Although the salary was significantly lower, our family of 3 could finally be together. Buying a house finally became a priority. Zhou Lei and I counted all our savings, but we were still short by tens of thousands for the down payment. Dad, without a second thought, helped us cover the shortfall. Soon, we bought a second-hand 2-bedroom apartment. After a simple paint job, we moved in. Though the financial pressure increased, we finally had our own home. Yu Chunlan was naturally happy too, as she could finally bring back her dog. Dad still found time to visit and see the baby despite his work. Sometimes Yu Chunlan came as well, tidying up while nagging, You need to get back to work. My daughter Ingwa was right. A woman staying home as a housewife will fall out of touch with society. You can't just stay home and ask Zhou Lei for money. Ingwa said. Again and again, until I could no longer bear it. Was it my choice to be a housewife? I had no other option. Her constant repetition was suffocating me. I finally retorted, if Ingwa was so clear-headed and perfect, why did she take that irreversible path? Yu Chunlan's face turned pale, her lips trembling, unable to speak. But my dad, hearing this, was furious. Mengdan, are you out of your mind? Talking nonsense. I was stunned. From childhood until now, except for when I insisted on marrying Zhou Lei, Dad had never been so harsh with me, using such crude words, showing how deeply influenced he was by Yu Chunlan. Forget it. Yu Chunlan tried to calm Dad down. I was wrong too. But Dad's anger hadn't subsided. We're leaving. With a loud bang, they walked out hand in hand. I shouted in anger, Go ahead. And don't come back. As I yelled, my sorrow deepened and tears streamed down my face. Zhou Lei, oblivious to my emotional turmoil, brought up his parents again. After buying the house, my in-laws often quarreled, wanting to move in with us. Zhou Lei had already wavered, and he often hinted at it in our conversations. To him, I gradually became the unreasonable, overbearing daughter-in-law who insisted on keeping mother and son apart. But whenever I recalled the despair and fear of that rainy night before giving birth, I couldn't bring myself to face my in-laws. Yet after much deliberation, I agreed. After all, they were his parents. When they arrived, it didn't take long before we had a major argument. On the first night, To save on air conditioning, they came into our room to sleep once it got dark. The three of them chatted and played cards, then snored loudly. I protested, but Zhou didn't mind. It's summer. What's the big deal about family? Yet I still managed to send them out. The second day passed peacefully. On the third morning, I woke up to find my father-in-law's foot next to my pillow. Terrified, I jumped out of bed and furiously confronted Zhou. My mother-in-law intervened. What's wrong? Your father's back hurts. It's uncomfortable to sleep on the floor, so I let him lie on the bed for a while. He didn't even take off his clothes. You let them in again while I was asleep, didn't you? I was furious enough to tear Zhou apart. He just hung his head silently. My mother-in-law got anxious. Let go. Are you crazy? Are you made of gold? I retched uncontrollably. Get out. All of you, get out. Though I managed to send my in-laws away, Zhou and I were now trapped in endless arguments. During these confrontations, he revealed a side of himself I didn't recognize, one filled with anger, annoyance, disdain, and hatred. Sometimes, when the baby cried at night, he would suddenly jump up, storm out, and not return all night. I sometimes wondered why Zhou had such a side to him. Dad still visited, dropping off food and supplies, looking at the baby, and then leaving angrily. If he happened to catch us arguing, he would silently avoid it. One day, with tears streaming down my face, I pitifully grabbed my dad's sleeve and asked, Dad, are you really not going to care about me anymore? Dad sighed. If I didn't care about you, why would I come here every day? I said, I know I was wrong last time. Stop it. How about coming home with me for dinner today? Andy wants to make something delicious for you. She's that kind-hearted? Dandan. All right, I said. On our way home, we found Yu Chunlan being scolded by someone on the street. It turned out that Yu Chunlan had gone to buy groceries and followed a young woman carrying a child. The woman mistook her for a kidnapper and nearly beat her up. When the woman kicked her, Haidu jumped in front of her and took the kicks for her. Despite being kicked, Haidu wasn't angry at all and kept wagging his tail furiously at the woman. I took a closer look at the young woman and suddenly realized why. She resembled Ingwa, who had passed away, in both looks and stature. No wonder Yu Chunlan couldn't take her eyes off the young woman, even while being scolded. On the way home, I avoided Haidu, and he avoided me. When he saw me entering the house, he immediately became dejected. Seeing you here, he thought he was going to be sent away again, Yu Chunlan said, distressed. I felt a bit awkward and glanced at Haidu, only to find him sneaking a peek at me too. During dinner, Haidu was listless, refusing to eat or drink. Yu Chunlan tried to coax him for a long time without success. Finally, she took out her phone, played a video for him, and held it in front of him. Haidu immediately sat up straight, his eyes focused, and his ears perked up. Curious, I sneaked a look. The video showed Ingwa, looking at Haidu across the screen and through time. Haidu, I'm leaving. It might be a very long time before I come back. You need to be good at home, okay? Woo. You need to behave at home. Eat well, sleep well, and be the best Haidu, okay? Whoa. Their conversation left me in awe. I even wondered if I was seeing things or if my mind was playing tricks on me, as it seemed like there were tears in Haidu's eyes. When the video ended, Yu Chunlan hugged Haidu's big head and said, We will never abandon you. Please eat, okay? Haidu sighed like an old man and finally got up, walked to his bowl, and started eating. Was this video left by Ingwa before she left? I quietly asked. Dad nodded. I didn't say anything else, feeling a mix of emotions. After dinner, I fought with Yu Chunlan to wash the dishes. After a while, the baby suddenly got excited, bouncing in his grandpa's arms, and clearly said a syllable towards Haidu. Yeah. Dad laughed. The baby is starting to talk. He's not like you. You always put on a long face when you see Haidu. As the conflicts with Zhou deepened, he would occasionally disappear. When he left, I felt restless alone at home, so I often went to my father's place. I started visiting Hui Tree Alley more frequently and sometimes even stayed over. Soon, Haidu and I reached an understanding to stay out of each other's way, moving along the walls whenever we saw each other. Zole, who could go out as he pleased, resented me for going back to my parents' home. One day, he confronted my dad. "Master, are you just going to let her be this way, cutting off all ties with my parents?" He had always called my dad Master since he was his apprentice and had never changed it, even after we got married. "That's your family matter. I have no standing to interfere." My dad always calmly deflected. "You just look down on me because my family is poor." Dad lifted his head and met his gaze. "It's not about wealth." "Then what is it about?" Zole shouted angrily, slamming the table so hard that the baby threw up. Yu Chunlon was furious. "You'd better leave. You're scaring the child." Zole waved his hand dismissively. "Who are you to tell me to leave?" He shouted and started flipping the table. The commotion frightened the baby again, making him gasp for breath and unable to cry out. I was terrified, frantically patting his chest and back. When he finally cried out again, I almost collapsed with relief. By then, Yu Chunlon had grabbed Zole and was pushing him out the door while Haida bared his teeth and growled at him menacingly. Zole seemed concerned about the baby. "Is he okay?" As he tried to approach me, I pushed him away. "If you're going to act out like this in my home, apologize to Auntie." Zole sneered. Yu Chunlon tried to mediate. "It's okay, let it go." "Let it go." I was furious. "If you don't respect my aunt, how can we continue?" Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Yu Chunlon stunned, staring at me. "When have you ever respected my parents? How could that be the same? How have your parents treated me? What have they done to you? Killed you?" I had no response. "Given this, we should separate for a while. I won't go back for now." "You said it." Zole roared. "Yes, I did." I opened the door to see him out. Now that I planned to stay longer, Haida's presence became a focal point again. In truth, I was still afraid of dogs, but this time, I couldn't bring myself to ask Yu Chunlon to send Haidu away. Anyone with a normal sense of empathy couldn't do such a thing. I had eyes. I could see that Haidu had emotions and knew how to protect his family. Besides, even though I was afraid of dogs, I had become somewhat familiar with Haidu. So, we coexisted. Seeing that I didn't bring it up, Yu Chunlon finally relaxed. Life became peaceful and quiet. They went to work every day and cooked together in the evenings, eating and drinking as a family. During the day, it was often just me, the baby, and Haidu at home. Haidu, now old, loved to bask in the sun, often lying in the courtyard for hours, sometimes sitting quietly, lost in thought. The beautiful glow around him highlighted his youthful elegance. He seemed afraid of startling us, always keeping his distance. But whenever I played with the baby, he watched intently, tilting his head cutely. One day, after returning from buying groceries, I settled the baby in a rocking chair in the courtyard and went inside to put things away. When I came back out, I was startled. Haidu was sitting close to the baby, panting heavily with his mouth open. "What are you doing?" I screamed, rushing over to hit him. At that moment, I heard hurried footsteps at the door. I ran to check and saw a homeless man running away. I had been careless and forgot to close the door. Haidu relaxed and wandered off to sleep again. When I told Dad about it, he laughed. Haidu was just protecting the baby, like a little bodyguard. So smart. I was amazed. Feeling a bit ridiculous, I picked a piece of meat from the bowl and placed it in Haidu's dish. Seeing this, Haidu was so scared he froze, turning into a statue. Dad and Yu Chunlon laughed. Yu Chunlon truly loved Haidu. She interacted with him every day, often pretending to be surprised to see him. "Oh, isn't this Haidu?" But for some reason, Haidu sometimes loved to escape. More exaggeratedly, he would bring stray dogs home several times. Yu Chunlon would collapse in frustration. "Haidu again. All right. Our Haidu is amazing. Watch him closely. Dogs need discipline too. If someone takes him away, you'll cry." I said, the strays making my scalp tingle. "And these. I'll send them away. Right away." Yu Chunlon quickly promised. After Zole calmed down, he came to Hui Tree Alley several times, trying to take me home. Somehow, he seemed to have had a change of heart, swearing up and down that he would change and that his parents would never trouble me again. Yu Chunlan sneered. Men's words are just lies. My dad sighed. Dandan, go back and have a proper talk. Marriage is not child's play. You have to face it, good or bad. Running away isn't a solution. Dad hoped I would take this seriously. I was thinking of compromising too, especially since we already had a baby. With Soleil willing to bend, I rashly decided to go back with him. I didn't expect that Yu Chunlan's prediction would come true right after we returned. The next day, Soleil started bringing up old issues, incessantly talking about his parents. Predictably, we started arguing again. His face contorted with rage, his eyes bloodshot. If you hate my parents so much, fine. Live on your own then, he shouted, slamming the door so hard it shook the house. Then he stormed off. He left without a backward glance, as if he never had a wife or a child. But I felt a strange sense of calm. I was truly exhausted, and Soleil must have been genuinely furious too. Married with a child, yet unable to live with his parents. He needed a wife who was unconditionally virtuous, patient, obedient, and understanding, not a stubborn woman like me. But I admit, I am indeed stubborn. Over these days, I had thought things through and now had no more illusions. This marriage had no future. It was time to consider what to do next. I chose this man and this life. Now I had to untangle it bit by bit. I needed to let go of the years of emotions and time I had invested. I had even argued with my dad and run away from home for Soleil, just to be with him. Those bold, reckless marks of youth, though embarrassing, were part of my past. I admit, I am tough on the outside but fragile inside. I can't just cut ties cleanly. Marriage isn't something you can easily discard. I will move on, but I need time and space to process it alone. I locked myself in the room, not answering calls or going out all day. Dad was worried sick, standing by the door, coaxing me in a soft and then stern tone. Dandan, open the door. You're going to scare the baby. I didn't respond because my mind was a mess, and because I knew that my dad was the one person who would never leave me no matter how I ignored him. Yu Chunlan, however, was annoyed. Meng Dan, you need to cut it off when it's time. This is so spineless. Are you trying to worry your dad to death? Cut it off, yes. I was trying, I answered her in my mind. It was quiet outside for a while, then I heard Yu Chunlan softly say, Old Meng, are you okay? I felt a chill in my heart. Old Meng, Old Meng. Yu Chunlan's voice grew louder. Then suddenly she screamed, Old Meng, what's wrong? My heart jumped out of my chest, and I flung open the door. Outside, Yu Chunlan looked smug, and my dad looked both amused and exasperated. Yu Chunlan had been trying to scare me. But since I was already out, I didn't care about anything else. I ignored whatever expression my dad had and threw myself into his arms, crying, Dad, I'm sorry. Having a daughter like me must have been so stressful. As the tears fell, I finally made a decision. Yu Chunlan sighed with relief. It's good that you came out. Take the baby out for a walk, get some sunshine, eat something warm and spicy, and then keep living well. That night, Yu Chunlan opened up to me, baring her heart. Do you want to hear how my Dangwa passed away? My dad tried to stop her, Chunlan, but she insisted on telling. That year, Dangwa married into a very wealthy family. Her in-laws demanded that she not work and stay home to prepare for pregnancy. They gave her everything she wanted and plenty of pocket money. This family was indeed generous. In short, Dangwa's father was very satisfied. But Dangwa insisted on working, which led to constant arguments with her husband. Her mother-in-law slandered her, accusing her of having an affair with her boss. Later, her mother-in-law took it upon herself to go to her workplace and resign on her behalf. Whenever she found a new job, her mother-in-law would cause a scene there as well. With their power and influence, the news spread, and no company dared to hire Dangwa anymore. When Dangwa confronted her mother-in-law, her husband blamed her for being ungrateful. It was around that time that Dangwa developed depression, but thankfully she had Heido and continued her treatment. I saw her smiling every day, thinking she was slowly getting better. But one day, she called home, crying and saying she wanted a divorce. Unfortunately, her father answered the phone. Instead of comforting her, he scolded her harshly. He said women should uphold virtue, bear children, be filial to their in-laws, and that talking about divorce would bring divine retribution. That heartless madman cursed his own daughter to be struck by lightning. The next time I saw Dangwa, she was lying in the morgue. That last call was her cry for help. Dandan, if Dangwa had had a good father, she wouldn't have died. She was only 25 when she passed. Tears splashed onto the table as Yu Chunlon spoke with deep sorrow. My Dangwa will be my lifelong pain. But you must be well. You, girl, are indeed bad. But these past 2 days when you refused to come out, I was truly scared, afraid you'd follow Dangwa's path. If I'd known it would help, I'd have scolded you to death, scared you to death. Dangwa's story hit too close to home, and I was in tears. Please don't. Actually, I just happened to figure things out. Figured things out? Dad asked. Yes, I have plans. But I might need to stay here a bit longer. Yu Chunlon breathed a sigh of relief. That's good. Don't worry, you're always welcome to stay. Your dad and I are here for you. Her sudden warmth almost made me break down again. After holding back for a long time, I suppressed my tears. Auntie, I said, thank you. I packed up all my personal belongings and moved back to Hui Qu Lane again, preparing for divorce. Hui Qu Lane, steadfast as iron, and I, flowing like water. This old courtyard, no matter how many times I come and go, it remains my home. Yu Chunlon urged me to find a job. During the day, she could take care of the baby and run the shop, and at night, she would go to the dog shelter. The baby would be taken care of by me and Dad. How busy will you guys be? It's okay. What's important is for you to find a job as soon as possible and not disconnect from society. I admit that Yu Chunlon's words make sense, so I tried applying for a few jobs. But before the results came out, another storm brewed. This time, it was something I cared deeply about. The dog shelter on the hill was reported, and more than 90 dogs had nowhere to go. Yu Chunlon calculated the money she could get her hands on and discussed with my dad, wanting to ask him for 50,000 yuan to rent another place to settle these dogs. I accidentally overheard their conversation and was very angry. That money was my dad's workers' compensation. Isn't it absurd to use such money to save a group of stray dogs? I couldn't reason with Yu Chunlon about this matter at all, so I went to find my dad. Dad, you don't need to worry about this matter. What do you mean? I've agreed to the money. It took me a long time to come back to my senses. I've known for a long time that I should oppose you getting together in the first place. Dad, I support you remarrying because you've been so hard for so many years that you really need someone to take care of you. But why can't you see it clearly? People who keep dogs are not normal in their minds. She's scarier, even has 100 dogs. My father asked me to sit down. Find someone to spend the rest of your life with. You should make the other person happy, not to reduce your own hardship. I knew she was a dog lover when I met her, and I'm willing to help her now. It's that simple. Dad, you're so angry. Don't you think this money should be left to you? I shook my head helplessly. Dad, you know I don't think so. Then don't get involved. This is between me and Auntie. It all started like this, but I was always angry, leading to frequent conflicts. Later, Dad finally lost his temper. I've spoiled you too much. That's why you think everything should go your way. But don't forget, this is Auntie's home too. If you keep causing trouble like this, I'll help you rent a place and ask you to move out. I was shocked. Dad, I'm doing this for your own good, and now you want to kick me out? What good are you doing for me? She's my wife, and I'm willing to spend money on her. What's wrong with that? Dad, Auntie has been good to you with all her heart. Don't you feel anything at all? How did I raise such a heartless child? I'm not heartless. I argued helplessly, feeling deeply hurt. I stormed into the room, hastily packed some clothes, and picked up the baby, ready to leave. Yu Chunlon stopped me. Don't go. Where else can you go besides this home? I don't need your concern. You don't like me, then I'll leave. I can live in a clothing store or even a dog kennel. Don't worry, I won't ask your dad for the 50,000 yuan. He has agreed that we can move in with the dog first. As for the money, I'll figure something out slowly. She spoke frankly, almost as if she wanted to show how stubborn and difficult I was. Where else can I go? In order to salvage some dignity, I bravely said, I do have my own home. Yu Chunlon still wanted to stop me, but Dad said, let her go. Feeling increasingly wronged, I pretended to decisively leave. I felt ridiculous even to myself. Of course, Dad understood my intentions. This time, he didn't want to indulge me. Was it fun for me to make such a scene? But once words are spoken, they cannot be taken back. I could only grit my teeth and walk out. At that moment, Black Bean unexpectedly used a clever trick. It seized an opportunity and slept on top of my suitcase, refusing to budge. I pushed it for a long time before finally forcing it off. Yet it persisted, chasing me to the courtyard gate before I could shut it inside. Its whimpering echoed in my heart. Who could have expected that in the end? Only Black Bean would try to keep me. I pushed open the long unseen door of my home, and the first thing I saw was my father-in-law using the bathroom with the door open. My mother-in-law came out in response, and upon seeing me, her expression turned cold. You've come back just in time. Leave my grandson here, take your father's things, and get out. I looked to Zhonglei leaning against the door and asked, what's going on? No big deal, he snorted. My parents want to use that room, and your father's things are in the way. My father had sometimes stayed here temporarily, so there were some personal items left behind, now bundled up in bedsheets and carried out by my father-in-law. When we bought this house, my father also supported us. Who are you to decide? I said, my entire body trembling with anger. Zhonglei just snorted and didn't reply. My mother-in-law threw the bundle outside the door, then tried to snatch my baby from my arms. Startled, the baby began crying uncontrollably. Summoning a sudden burst of strength, I desperately pushed her away. She stumbled back several steps, falling to the ground. Unable to get up, she cried out in pain. Seeing this, Zhonglei's gaze toward me turned unsettling. I had seen his fierce side before, but this level of anger scared me enough to forget to move. Sure enough, he slapped me hard across the face, leaving my ears ringing. My mind went blank, and it took me a moment to realize he was hitting me. I gritted my teeth, ready to fight back, only to see my baby had been taken by my father-in-law, crying inconsolably, face red from the distress. Terrified, I pleaded, he can't handle this. He might cry until he can't breathe. Please give him back to me. But my father-in-law ignored me, glaring fiercely at Zhonglei. I'll close the door while you hit her. If you don't kill her today, you son of a bitch, I've been wanting to lay hands on her. Seeing Zhonglei raise his hand at me again, I closed my eyes in despair, thinking that today I might not get away. Just as the door was about to close and I was sinking into despair, a dog burst through, knocking the door open like lightning and pouncing on Zhonglei, pinning him down instantly. It was Black Bean, followed by my father and Yu Chunlon. The three of them came like divine intervention, rescuing me. My dad pulled me into his arms, and I shivered uncontrollably, icy cold all over. Don't be afraid, Dan. My dad stared down Zhonglei. Anyone who dares to hurt you, I'll fight them to the end. At that moment, in my eyes, Dad was the most heroic person in the world. Yu Chunlon looked equally lovely, already having rescued my baby, soothing him in her arms with such gentleness that it made me want to cry. Dad, I'm sorry, I was wrong. I stuttered tearfully. After I left, Black Bean kept anxiously scratching at the courtyard gate. Yu Chunlon, feeling uneasy, brought my dad and Black Bean to follow me. We called the police. Zhonglei was detained for intentionally causing harm, held for a week. My in-laws also called the police, accusing Black Bean of causing harm, wanting it euthanized. This was when I saw Yu Chunlon's wisdom. She started recording with her phone from the moment she heard the commotion in the house. The video proved that Black Bean acted only to protect me, pinning Zhonglei down without doing anything else. It wasn't a vicious dog. It was a hero. Unable to harm Black Bean, my mother-in-law turned her attention to Yu Chunlan. She paid some children to sneak in with markers while Yu Chunlan was busy with customers, quietly vandalizing most of the clothes in the store. Yu Chunlan wanted to catch them, but the children scattered, and she couldn't get a good look at any of them. After committing the vandalism, my mother-in-law called to brag, "Give me back my grandson, or you'll regret it." I stood firm. The custody of the baby will be decided by the court. And as for you, if you don't compensate for the damage to the clothing store, we will sue you to the end. Your son has just tasted prison food. You might get to taste it soon too. From that moment on, Yu Chunlan and I became true family. We might have our internal conflicts, but we would not allow outsiders to bully us even a bit. Next, I helped Yu Chunlan drag the vandalized clothes to set up stalls everywhere, trying to sell them at a low price. "Why are you helping me?" Yu Chunlan asked. "I caused trouble for you, and I want to help," I replied. That almost sounded like a human sentence. She rolled her eyes at me, but I couldn't help but smile. I might have been spoiled, but I had a heart. There was a fact I had to accept. Yu Chunlan was truly unlucky to have me as a stepdaughter, but I was incredibly fortunate to have a stepmother like her. After selling all the clothes, we still suffered heavy losses. Yu Chunlan couldn't sleep for 2 nights. Fortunately, through the surveillance footage from nearby stores, I found out where those children were. It wasn't hard to find them. They were local kids who often played nearby, so someone recognized them. I reported them to the police again. Soon, the police came and took my mother-in-law away. Within minutes, the whole village knew what had happened in their family. It was a disgrace. The next day, Zhonglei appeared with a murderous look in front of the courtyard gate of Hui Shu Lane. Black Bean sensed danger and bristled up. I didn't want to show weakness. In broad daylight, could Zhonglei dare to hit me again in front of the neighbors? Even if he hit me, he couldn't run away. But suddenly, I remembered something important. This made me hesitate, but I finally swallowed my anger and negotiated with Zhonglei. "Have your mother apologize to Auntie, and we can write a letter of understanding. Please ask the police to drop the case." He frowned at me. "And you don't need to compensate us anymore," I added. "If you don't compensate, I'll have to pay. It's painful to think about, but I endure. I just hope you'll leave soon." Hearing that he didn't need to pay, Zhonglei's eyes brightened. "Really?" "Yes, really." I acted out of anger. He finally relaxed a bit and said with a softer tone, Dan, if you had reasoned with me earlier, we wouldn't have ended up like this." He actually thought I was unreasonable. How ironic, considering how I had loved him with all my heart. I didn't want to argue with him anymore, so I kept silent and just tightly held Black Bean's collar to prevent it from attacking suddenly. Only after Zhonglei walked out did I realize my palms were sweating. I had seen Zhonglei's craziness before. In that short moment, I was really afraid. If Zhonglei had attacked me just now, Black Bean might really have bitten him without mercy. Solving one crisis could lead to danger for Black Bean, because Zhonglei would never give up. He would definitely call the police to take away Black Bean. That would be the end of Black Bean. For its sake, I endured it all and would continue to endure. Life is really strange. Zhonglei, once family, was about to become a stranger. And a dog that I had always neglected, I now wanted to protect. I was willing to compromise and yield for it, because unconsciously, it had become my family. I finally divorced with Zole. The house belongs to him, and he compensated me according to the house payment. He doesn't insist on custody of our baby. My parents have a bad temper. They definitely can't take care of the child. The baby is still young. Staying with mom is more suitable. Don't worry, if they come causing trouble, just tell me. In the end, he seemed somewhat reluctant. I will come to see you often in the future. Dan, if only you had been like this earlier. I said, goodbye. Just remember to provide child support for the baby. You don't need to see me. He never understood that my calmness towards him was only because, besides disgust, I no longer cared about him at all. Realizing I would stay for long, Yu Chunlan tested me. Should I send Heido back to the dog shelter? Okay, I'll accompany you to send him. I nodded. She fell silent. I personally bathed Heido and put on him the new bag I had given him. I led Heido onto the car. Yu Chunlan also silently got on, gently stroking Heido. Auntie, don't be sad. I'm not really sending Heido away. I comforted her gently. You are the mistress of this family. Whether I or Heido, everything is up to you. She looked up at me in surprise. Do you still want me then? I asked. She blinked. If you behave well, I will. I will. I promise to behave well in the future. I said softly. Auntie, I want to go to the dog shelter with you. I have some money now. How much does the shelter need? I'll give it to you. She sniffed, shaking her head with her hand. That's different. You're having difficulties now. How can I take your money? I insist, to compensate for the loss of clothes in your shop. But that's not your fault. I smiled and changed the subject. Let me see what else I can help you with. That dog shelter, it was originally built by Rugua, right? Because Heido loves to meddle, likes to pick up stray dogs and bring them home. After a long time, Rugua started paying attention to them. Yu Chunlan also smiled, but there was a glint of tears in her eyes. How did you know? I also know you used to really dislike cats and dogs. Yes. Heido went out 3 times, and 2 of those times he brought back dogs. Haha, I just couldn't understand. But Rugua wanted to establish a rescue base, so I had to go along with her. Later, there were really a lot of dogs. But with so many dogs, Rugua still couldn't stay. When she left me not just one Heido, but also Huangdo, Ludo, Hongdo. This child, her heart is so soft. I wonder who she takes after. Who else could Rugua take after? After her mom, I have this honest but soft stepmother. She could put up with my dog temperament and remember to look after me. My father was right, Ms. Yu Chunlan, completely having an ancient hot heart and not self-conscious. It was soon to come. The dog farm was quiet and there was no sound. Yu Chunlan disliked the atmosphere. Heido, hurry and greet a call to everyone. Let's welcome the guests. Heido stood, Wang several times in the air. As soon as the sound rang out, from several rows of dog kennels, a flood of countless dogs surged out and surrounded us. I was so scared that my legs went weak, and Yu Chunlan laughed and pulled me close, saying, "Look at Heidu. Isn't he impressive?" I looked over and saw Heidu standing tall with his chest out, looking every bit like a leader receiving reports from his subordinates, both imposing and amusing. Many of these dogs were brought home by him, so everyone here sees Heidu as a benefactor, someone earnestly explained beside me. I couldn't help but laugh, then turned to see over a dozen people bustling around, taking time to nod in greeting to me. There were so many people silently working at the dog shelter, something I hadn't anticipated. They varied widely in age and gender, but their expressions as they looked at the dogs were uniformly filled with compassion and concern. This is Xiaoqi, abandoned while pregnant on the roadside by her owner. This one is Banner, you see. Someone cut off half of his ear. This is San, who only has 3 legs. And over there, lying paralyzed, was thrown into the woods where it was infested with nearly 10,000 maggots when found. Yu Chunlan pointed to each dog, introducing their individual stories to me. Actually, can we afford not to feel sorry for them? We know this job is endlessly difficult. It's not like we're born to love dogs or cats. At least I'm not. But what else can we do? If we don't take care of them, they're doomed. It's not that we haven't thought about giving up, but we just can't bring ourselves to do it. Life is hard for humans, but for these wandering souls, it's even harder. That's why Rugua couldn't bear to see it and wanted to provide them with a place to live. She tried her best, and after she left, Yu Chunlan had no choice but to take over. Yu Chunlan, a dog owner, was driven by her reluctance to abandon these dogs. The more she took, the more dogs surrounded her, and the harder it became for her to stop. Baby is more than a year old now, inseparable from Heidu. They do everything together, with the baby taking unsteady steps, often stumbling after a few steps, while Heidu stays close, always ready to cushion falls with his body. They eat together, sleep together, and play together. But sometimes they have disagreements, and then the baby ignores Heidu. Yet Heidu is incredibly patient, circling around the baby, comforting him for a long time with just a few words. One day, suddenly, the baby spoke, "Do." I was both surprised and delighted, leaning in to listen closely. "Do," the baby said again. I felt a bit disappointed. The baby's first call was not mommy, but his Do. Haidu isn't afraid of me now, often pestering me to take it for a walk. So I take it out, walking into the sunset, saying hello to my neighbors, and then buying some beef bones at the brine store. On the way back, Haidu rushes in front of me to get in the door. When free, it'll also poke my phone with its wet nose and invites me to video chat with Yu Chunlan, who's in the dog yard. On the video, Yu Chunlan's as busy as the wind, and the lens shakes all over, sometimes fixing on a small golden retriever. "Maudo, call your brother." I can't help but laugh, turning to see Haidu's expression and seeing it immediately sit up straight. "Wong," the little golden retriever barks lightly. Haidu's face is serious, not saying a word. "Wong Wong." Maudo calls again. This time, Haidu responds seriously. "Wong." I laugh until I'm breathless. Haidu looks down at me, eyes full of tenderness. Yu Chunlan decided to close her clothing store, so I took over a pet shop in a nearby town and handed it over to her to manage. With this arrangement, the dog shelter now has a small storefront, making it easier for stray dogs to be adopted. The prices are reasonable, and I've heard business is quite good. It's all because the previous owner had to move, reluctantly selling the entire shop along with the pet groomer. After taking over, Yu Chunlan was pleasantly surprised to find that business was indeed booming. In this small town, there's a constant stream of cats and dogs coming in every day for baths. Once, even a little lamb came in, Bainji, and attempting to butt me with its mini horns. Another time, a hamster hid in Heido's arms, watching everyone around while staying completely silent. Every living creature truly has its own kind of charm. Every weekend, Dad would bring the baby to the pet shop to help Yu Chunlan as much as possible. My fingers weren't very nimble, but I had strength to help lift the large dogs in and out of the bath, giving Yu Chunlan's back a break. When things got busy, we'd argue, forget about it soon after, then turn around and discuss what to have for dinner. The baby was even more incredible. Ever since he could say, "Do," he couldn't stop talking, becoming more and more of a chatterbox. One day, when I went over, I saw him wearing a small apron, sitting seriously at the door, speaking unclearly. Tuanai's tremor is caused by the collar, right? It's almost like Martian, and I, a mother, can't understand it at all. I asked my dad in confusion, "What is he saying?" My dad was delighted, almost laughing out loud and barely able to stutter. After a long time, he finally explained what happened. "How about it, don't you understand? The baby was asking if you'd like to adopt an adorable dog."